The article was originally published in the New York Times. Link to the article is in the description below. If you like watching our videos, subscribe and hit the like button so we can keep publishing. In the Mojave, humans are reminded of our smallness, our naivete, our transience. On a frigid March morning in 2022, a friend and I were visiting the Mojave National Preserve in California's San Bernardino County. Joshua trees, normally crooked and whimsical with spiky green leaves, were instead blanched white and charred, limbs swinging in 25-mile-per-hour winds. Creosote bushes, blackbrush and yucca, all of which were once shelter or food for jackrabbits, night lizards and ground squirrels, had also been scorched. In August 2020, the dome fire burned more than 1 million Joshua trees alone, leaving skeletal remains of what had been a dense woodland. We were there to help replant Joshua trees. To the south rose Sima Dome, the gentle granite hill for which the fire was named. Gradually shifting landscapes are characteristic of the Mojave Desert, where hard-packed dirt gives way to low-lying springs and sandy washes. These shifts are difficult to see unless you look closely, but since living here, the desert has taught me the art of perception, how to slow down and actually see what's in front of you. I grew up in a suburb just outside San Diego County, 90 minutes from the Mojave Desert. But my parents preferred taking our family to the Pacific Coast and the redwoods up north, California's canonical landscapes. If we entered the Mojave, it was usually just to pass through. As a result, I thought deserts were flat and barren. Official definitions confirmed my ideas. The United States Geological Survey defines American deserts as areas of the country which receive less than 10 inches, 250 millimeters, of annual precipitation. When I moved to Las Vegas last October, the environment upended my expectations of sparseness and monotony. I hiked through slot canyons and along the Colorado River. I brushed my hands over piñons and junipers, nicked my fingers on cholla and barrel cactuses. I developed a lexicon of the Southwest, learning about sandstone rock walls made red by oxidized iron, and sky islands, isolated mountain ranges with drastic elevation and vegetation changes from the surrounding landscape. Southern Nevada's Spring Mountains constitute one such range, rising suddenly from the Mojave like an island jutting from the sea. When I hiked there, among quaking aspens and bristlecone pines, it was as though I were in another world. Far from being hostile to life, the Mojave is abundant. There is some truth to desert stereotypes. In the Mojave, temperatures are extreme. The thermometer reached 130 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer of 2021. The desert kills those who come unprepared and demands we pay attention if we want to survive. In spite of the landscape's intensity, some plant life, like the Joshua tree, has thrived here for millions of years. People, including the Mojave and Chemehuevi, have dwelled here for thousands of years. The desert's native peoples have long known, as part of their cultural heritage, how to read the landscape, where to find water and shade during times of heat, to avoid depressions and washes during times of flash flood. In Ecology of Fear, Mike Davis writes that Anglo-descended settlers lacked the cultural knowledge to understand their environmental context. When pioneers, for example, were stranded in the below sea level basin east of the Panamint Mountains, they deemed the area Death Valley. The morbid theme stuck, with landforms today called Coffin Canyon and the Funeral Mountains. But the Timbisha Shoshone have lived in the valley, which they call Tepipa, for thousands of years. It's easy to estrange ourselves from the places we inhabit, or believe them to be fearsome and deadly. But non-natives can learn from indigenous Mojave people's relationship with the desert. Spending time in the desert teaches you to exist within this ecosystem, affirming we are of the landscape, not a part. When I began to pay attention, I noticed that because the weather is relatively constant, seasonal change arrives in subtle shifts rather than the markers I was used to, like changing leaves and summer wildfires. The gradual lengthening of springtime light. The slight cloud cover during cold spells. Once in a while, the shifts are not so subtle. In August, a sudden and heavy humidity replenished my dry hair and skin. Then, the skies broke, my first monsoon season. Time and scale feel different in the Mojave. This land is very old, made up of soil, lichen, and algae pressed together over thousands of years into a living crust. The spring mountains formed millions of years ago from ancient rivers, sand dunes, and the sea. Exposed metamorphic rocks in the Mojave National Preserve date back as far as 2.5 billion years, roughly half the age of the planet. In the desert, humans are reminded of our smallness, our naivete, our transience. This is the meaning of geological time. Our bodies will die, leaving in their wake a changed atmosphere, but the rocks and sand will go on. When my friend and I planted Joshua trees in a singed landscape, we didn't perceive much remaining life. But by May, I would see that not everything was dead after all. Orange and yellow wildflowers pinpricked the soil. Cream-colored blossoms sprang from surviving yuccas. Blooming creosote smelled of warmth. When I looked closer, as the desert itself had taught me, I saw something growing alongside torched plants, spokes of green. They were young Joshua trees, pushing through charred earth. Meg Bernhard is a writer whose work has appeared in The New Yorker, Guernica, and the New York Times Magazine.